to The Haystack. My name is Jonathan, and today with me I have Dr. Trina Boice, and she is an adjunct professor at BYU, Idaho. She's written many books. In fact, today we're talking about one of her books, and that is called Via Dolorosa.
Did I hold it up?
Yeah, let's see the cover. Via Dolorosa, Christ's Path to the Cross. And so we wanted to cover this specifically because we're coming up on Easter and celebrating our Savior's sacrifice and his resurrection. And why don't you tell us? Oh, should I introduce you? I mean, I don't do big introductions, but go ahead and tell us about the book.
The book is much more interesting than I am for sure. Although my biggest claim to fame that LDS audiences get excited about is I have a bunch of books, and one of my goals as an author is to write a book with each of my sons. And so I'm currently writing a book with my youngest son, which I'm super excited about. It should hit stores in May. But my oldest son and I wrote a dating book together, and it spun off, and he invented the LDS dating app called Mutual.
You know
Did
what?
I
I've
tell
heard
you
of
that
that. I've
before?
heard of that.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I'm so proud of him. And, I would like to think that I did important things with my life, but how could anybody top bringing families together for eternity? That's what his app does. And they
Hmm.
get hundreds and hundreds of emails every week thanking him for bringing, the two spouses together. And then they'll send pictures of their kids once they've been married for a number of years. It's so
Yeah.
amazing. I'm so proud of him.
I think my wife and I just missed that era where the dating changed using apps. I came home from my mission and she was in the singles ward, and we just connected through the singles ward the old
Old
fashioned way.
school.
I have no idea what the dating scene is like using apps, but I imagine there's
Different.
so many choices, and it's better that we have like a Latter-day Saint focused app. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. He says his biggest regret in life is that he didn't meet his wife on the dating app. They met the old-fashioned way through friends. But the app has been so successful, like you said, for our Latter-day Saint community. My brother is a wealthy attorney who works at Facebook. And so when the two of them came up with the idea, my brother said, I'll be your angel investor. And he's not a member of the church. And so he said, after this proved to be very successful, he said, let's do one for mainstream Christians.
Yeah.
And so they did. They kind of used the same formula, the same template, and they created another app called Arc. Isn't that a cute
Hmm.
name?
Yeah, it's very appropriate.
Exactly. Yeah, so cute. They were hiking in Guatemala one day just because they wanted to take a fun trip together. And my brother was asking him, how's the dating scene? Because he had just graduated from BYU and left and moved to Arizona. And we were like, Arizona? Why Arizona? He didn't have a job there or friends there or family there. And he's like, I just feel inspired to go there. And we're like, okay. And anyway, so my brother was saying, how is dating in Arizona compared to Provo, Utah? He's like, well, it's different. The pickings are slimmer than in, Provo, Utah. And so my brother said, well, do you use dating apps like Tinder? And my son was like, yeah, no, we don't do that, as members of the church. And then they both kind of thought for a minute, and one of them, they don't remember which one, said, what would it look like if Tinder got baptized?
Mm,
And
yeah.
that's how the app was born.
Well, we're grateful for those types of developments because with
Yeah,
all the bad stuff happening, we need some good things in there too.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So this particular book, Via Dolorosa, I just wrote by myself. I had
Hmm.
gone to Israel. Have you been to Israel?
No, no, I really want to go. In fact, Watcher Palmer, who runs the YouTube channel, his name is Scott Palmer. He is actually hosting a tour through Jerusalem through Legacy Tours, October 31st to November 11th. So I guess I'll put a
Yep.
link to that in the description below for any viewers here who want to go and experience the Via Dolorosa themselves and have somebody like, Watcher Palmer come and narrate the whole thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, and hopefully things will be much safer there than they are right now. And that's kind of how it is in Israel, specifically Jerusalem. It is the most valuable piece of real estate on the planet because you've got
Mm,
three major religions all vying for their sacredest spots on, on earth,
Yeah.
Judaism, Christian, and Islam, of course. I was going to lead a tour this last October, but one by one, the guests pulled out because it was getting scary. Things were happening, and we obviously canceled the trip because safety first. But
Yeah.
so for those of your listeners who are watching and listening who don't even know what we're talking about, let me back up. So
Hmm.
the Via Dolorosa, which is a Latin term that means the painful path or the sorrowing way, it
Hmm.
is literally a path, a route in the city, the old city of Jerusalem, inside the walls. And a little bit outside the walls, that winds through the city from starting point Pontius Pilate's praetorium, where
Yeah.
it was announced Jesus would be crucified. And then that's where they gave him the crown of thorns, beat him up some more, and gave him a cross to start carrying through the streets to the outside of the city where people were crucified. So what happened is over the centuries, this route kind of became a pilgrimage where Christians from around the world would go to Jerusalem to reenact that pilgrimage or
Hmm.
that route of the last hours of Jesus's life. And so today you can go and follow that route, and it's an official route. Over the centuries, they have created markers over the 14 stations or stops along this path. And the markers are on the walls, and there are churches or other memorial things at
Yeah.
each of those 14 stops. And so when you go today, you see people in church groups, and their priest or pastor or preacher or whoever stops at each of the stations and teaches, reads the scriptures about what happened there. And sometimes you hear groups singing hymns in different languages, which is so cool, and melodies I've never heard before, which is so
Mm.
awesome. I think you see monks and friars walking in a procession, chanting or doing special ceremonial things at each of the stations. Sometimes you'll see people by themselves, very quietly and reverently, just meditating at each spot. Others are reading scriptures. Some groups are carrying giant crosses, taking
Yeah.
turns carrying these. Like, it's a huge thing. And millions of Christians do this every year. And yet, members of our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, have often never even heard of it. And so, after doing this myself, I thought, we need everybody to know about this because it's really cool. But I obviously recognize that not everybody can go to Israel, especially because there are always political skirmishes, military skirmishes. So you got to find the right pocket of time to be able to go and travel safely. Even 2 days before I went the first time, there were skirmishes up on Temple
Mm.
Mount. And I was like, oh no, do we need to cancel this? And our tour guide was like, no, this happens all the time, which is true.
Unfortunately.
But I'm
It,
so, so grateful that I got to go. And so, recognizing that not everybody can physically go, I thought, well, I want to create a book where families or individuals could kind of experience this journey. And so in the book, each chapter is a different station. And I
yeah.
explain the scriptures associated with that station, what happened, the lessons that we can learn, the qualities and characteristics of the Savior that are illustrated in what happened there and how he responded to certain things that were happening. And there's also scriptures and quotes from leaders of the church about those lessons and those stations. And there are one of my
Okay.
favorite parts of the book is, or of each chapter, are the fun Jewish facts, because you need
Mm.
to understand Judaism a little bit to really understand Jerusalem back then. I mean,
Right.
Jesus was Jewish, and it's really fun to see the traditions, how they were when Jesus was there, and how they have
Hmm.
translated into Christianity, of course, but even how Jews look at some of those things today. And then there's a section in each chapter where there are challenges or activity ideas, inviting families and individuals to incorporate some of those lessons in their life, especially right before Easter. And so,
Mm.
because there are 14 stations, ideally, you could read this book 14 days before Easter and take one a day with your family. Because, the prophet President Nelson challenged us to really go deep or just beef up our efforts with
Yeah.
honoring and celebrating Easter. Members of our church do Christmas great. We have nativities and,
Hmm.
special things that we create in our communities as well as our families and individually that are so great. But when it comes to Easter, we're just not that known for,
Yeah.
celebrating Easter big. And Christmas wouldn't even matter if Easter didn't happen. In other words, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so there's activity ideas in each chapter.
Well, I think that's excellent. I mean, I know last year when I gave a talk on Palm Sunday, like my talk kept getting put off and put off and put off, and then it fell on Palm Sunday. And then finally, when I was able to speak, I only had like just a couple minutes. And I realized, I said, today is Palm Sunday. And I realized nobody knew it was Palm Sunday. It's not something that Latter-day Saints often focus on,
Yeah.
but I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak on it. And I'm glad that right now the church is giving such a huge emphasis on this. And you mentioned that you do 14 chapters going to each station. From what I understand, 8 of those stations are biblical, whereas 6 are more traditional. And that, I think that goes into the traditions that you were talking about.
Yeah. So this tradition of walking this Via Dolorosa path had been going on for centuries and centuries. And then when evangelical Protestant churches got wind of it, they were like, wait a minute, we want this to be biblically based. And so 9
Hmm.
of the stations are found within the scriptures, and the
Okay.
other ones are based more on legend. And so the Pope at the time, and this was just in the last couple of decades, was like, okay, you're right. So we'll create a new list. And so he created a list of 9, but you have to pass through all of them anyway. And
Hmm.
even if they're legend or can't be proved, biblical scholars and historians and archaeologists debate the veracity of all of these locations, really.
Yeah, it came from somewhere.
Yeah, and regardless of their authenticity. We know Jesus walked through the city outside the gate, and it's
Exactly.
really cool to think, wow, I'm standing right where he walked. And he spent a lot of time in Jerusalem. So maybe he,
Hmm.
I did stand on the stones that people claimed were the actual stones, But regardless, it gives us an opportunity to stop and reflect and go through those scriptures and even those legends, being mindful of the price that he paid and that he did so willingly. I think it's a beautiful tradition. And I don't get so caught up on, the exact location. There
Hmm.
are several locations, the beginning and the end specifically. Where was Pontius Pilate's praetorium? There are 2 known sites that have some pretty good evidence both for and against. And the same thing with where Christ was crucified, for and against. And I visited all of them and I felt the spirit in all of those places, even in the places where the location was based on myth. Again, it gave me an opportunity to pause and really think about Jesus Christ. And whenever you do that, that's a good thing. And you'll
Yeah,
always feel the spirit. What's
that's a
really
great point.
sweet, yeah, what's sweet about the location and this trail was that Emperor Constantine really was the first emperor in all of Rome to embrace Christianity and convert. And his sweet mother also joined the church, well, the church at the time, the early
Hmm.
saints. And she wanted to go to Israel and specifically Jerusalem and collect relics and protect them and bring them to Rome. And so I've told you I'm writing this book right now with my youngest son all about Rome and the Christian sites and the early saints and Peter and Paul and all of those who were martyred and the price that they paid to be valiant missionaries of the gospel. It's so touching and heartbreaking, these stories. But again, uh, some of these sites are based on legend related to scriptures, and again, I don't get all hung up even with the relics. The Roman Catholic Church has done an amazing job of trying to preserve a
Hmm.
lot of these relics, and I don't know if they're real or not. Catholics absolutely revere these items, and you see them praying and going on pilgrimages, and doing amazing things. There are the stairs, the holy stairs are called the Scala Sancta, which supposedly are the stairs that Jesus Christ walked up to get to Pontius Pilate's praetorium. And so Constantine's mother went to Jerusalem and we're talking 330 AD, was pretty confident that she found the actual stairs and the praetorium. She had them shipped over to Rome, and you can actually go up them. And what you see are Christian, mostly Catholic pilgrims climbing up the stairs on their knees. And
Wow.
over the centuries, they were beautiful marble stairs, and then they eventually covered them with wood planks with kind of like little holes in between so you can see the marble below. But they realized, after centuries, there were grooves getting in
Yeah.
the stones because people, were doing this. And it is so sweet. And it was such an honor. Of course, I did it. I do all the things. And so I'm climbing up, and those wood planks, they're hard and it's painful. And I don't know if that was intentional because the tiny amount of pain that I experienced, which actually was kind of substantial because it's a long thing of stairs,
Mm.
it's just a fraction of what the Savior endured. And you see people climbing these stairs, doing a rosary on each stair or stopping and praying. And it's a very reverent exercise and so sweet. And anyway, you see that all over Jerusalem, all over Israel, really, and now all over Rome in this book that I'm writing. And I feel this spirit so strongly.
Yeah.
There's the final church that Constantine's mother, her name was Helena,
Mm.
identified is actually the last 5 stations. So it's that she's built this massive basilica, and it has been added on to over the centuries. So what we see isn't exactly what she had built. But before you go inside this massive place today, there's a big column that they will tell you is where Jesus was tied to, and again had another thrashing about, where they were scourging him.
Mm.
And that's where they stripped, that's one of the stations where they strip his outer robe. And so he wasn't completely nude. He had like a loincloth on at that point. And then they take him in, and what is now inside used to be outside on the hill of Golgotha, outside the city walls. And yet now it's all enclosed, other than this Roman column on the outside. All of the other stations are inside. And for members of our church, when you walk in, it's it's very different from what we would think it should be, like
Mm.
our temples that are light and bright and peaceful,
We're
it's
spoiled.
yeah, it's actually run by 3 different Roman Catholic, Armenian, Apostolic, and what was the third one? Anyway, 3 different Christian churches, and actually even the Muslims, they are in charge of maintenance, so they take turns trying to provide this environment, for people to come and worship.
Mhm.
But it's very dark. There's incense everywhere. So there's a smell that often members of our church are not used to. But that
Mhm.
incense has a symbol of being prayers going up to heaven. And so I
Yeah.
embrace that. I think that that's really sweet. But it's very dark and it's old, and so it smells old. And so I've heard some members of the church who've gone on tour say, "Oh, I did not feel the spirit there." But I do. I mean, you've got these massive ceilings that force your eyes to look upward into the heavens, and the architecture is different from what we're used to. But
Yeah.
it's the most touching part is seeing all of these pilgrims, and it's a crowded church. People going in there because they want to worship and adore and pray and give thanks. And I love all of that.
Yeah. I think the spirit is communicated through so many different cultures and through many different religions. Because when it comes down to it, people are earnestly living according to their belief, to the best of their knowledge and their
Exactly.
understanding. They're being faithful. In some cases, many of them are more faithful than us, and they don't like our culture. But in the end, I've been into this not a coliseum, a Catholic cathedral, in Sacramento. It was just gorgeous. And I love it. I love going into other churches. It's when they start, like marketing things and buy our swag. That's when I'm kind of like, okay, now I don't feel the spirit. But I do like that everyone's gathered here with a desire to follow Christ, even if they don't think we believe in the same Jesus or something. It's the ancient world would be very similar. They'd say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you don't believe in the same God." Well, I just don't call him the God of Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think it's the same person.
Yeah, actually, all three of those religions do claim Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as
Hmm.
their ancestry. So I'll share a story about Catholic cathedrals. I served my mission in Spain, and so I've been to many Catholic masses and seen cathedrals, around the world. But in one city where I was serving, my companion and I wandered into one of their, in the particular city, there was the big, massive cathedral, which is amazing. And then they had a smaller one that on both sides of town. Anyway, so one day it must have been our P day or something, and we wandered into this smaller one, and we were looking at their merchandise just to see what they had. And there was this young guy, 20s, maybe 30s, I don't know. And we just started chit chatting. We stand out because we had our name tags on. And he's
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you guys are Mormon missionaries." We're like, "Yeah, And so, are you a volunteer? What do you do here?" And he's like, "I'm actually one of the priests here." And we're like, "Really?" And tell us more. And so he was the younger priest, and then along came the older priest. Anyway, we just hit off with these guys. We had this great little friendship with them, really got a kick out of each other. They used to razz us and say, "Well, you guys have a bunch of wives in your church." And we'd say, "Well, somebody has to because you guys don't have any. So we would just play with each other like that. But there was a lot of love and respect. And I loved that. We could have argued about the doctrine and bicker on dogma differences, but instead we celebrated that, hey, we're all team Jesus,
Hmm.
let's focus on that. So one day we were over at their church and we were just chit-chatting like we always did. And then one of the older priests said, "Hey, do you want to come into the sacristy and pick out our outfits?" I call them outfits, but the robes and stuff. And I was like, "Yes." And so the sacristy is kind of a separate little room out off to the side of the main altar and the
Yeah.
nave, which is the big long area that you walk in where the chairs are and stuff. Anyway, so I'm like, "Yes." So we go in there and I got to open these long, skinny, flat drawers. And they had all these different colors. I'm like, "Oh, look at this one." And of course, the colors of the robes and the other vestments that they wear mean certain things depending on the season and the religious holiday or whatnot. Anyway, so I picked out something, and you could just tell they were really tickled because I was just going off of what was pretty.
Yeah.
And then they were like, "Hey, do you want to see how we do the Eucharist?" So you know what Eucharist, a
Yeah.
Catholic Eucharist is? So they had this old machine. It almost reminded me of a hole punch. And so they would buy wafers, like big rectangular
Hmm.
flat wafers, and then put them through this little cutter and then make them little round wafers. And that's their sacrament. And they believe that during the sacramental prayer, that wafer literally becomes the body of Christ. And
Yeah.
they even say that the priest puts it in your mouth and says body of Christ in English. And then the wine literally magically transforms into the blood of Christ. And it's one of the Catholic mysteries. And you're not allowed to chew it because then you would be breaking the bones of Christ. And so it sort of dissolves. It's very thin. But anyway, so I got to chop some stuff, thought that was really cool. And then they had the classic big giant bell. And so I'm like,
Oh, wow.
pulling the bell, letting them know, mass is getting ready to start. I mean, it was like awesome. And then the younger one was like, "Hey, you want to read the scripture that we're going to feature?" And I'm like, "Yes." And my companion's like, "No." So I'm like, "Yes." So they march me up, and I'm sitting on the altar, the lifted up, the elevated
Hmm.
podium area,
Cody. Yeah.
what we would call it. And then she's down on the front row just dying. And it was hilarious because there I am with my missionary name tag, clearly looking like a Mormon missionary. And it was so funny to watch the expressions of people in their faces as they were coming in. Some of them were like
Yeah.
doing a double take or looking confused. Some of them like, yeah, chuckled a little bit, like, or it was just really cute. And then these two priests, you could tell they were just getting a kick out of what they had just created, this
Yeah.
interdenominational service. And I just felt so honored to be a part of it. I thought it was just so much fun. And these were these humble people coming in to worship. They're so obedient. And I'm kind of getting all into the Catholic stuff because that's the book I'm writing right now. But
Hmm.
back to obedient, the Jewish people in Israel are so obedient.
Yeah.
And and I try to share that. I hope that readers feel that love of God. And again, we have difference of doctrine. They don't even believe Jesus Christ is the Messiah, um, which to me is just amazing because I'm a gospel doctrine teacher in my ward teaching Old Testament, and every single lesson screams Jesus Christ. There's so
Yeah.
many symbols in every single story. And I'm sure God put those in or had those experiences happen and made sure they were in the scriptures so that over the centuries, the Jews would be exposed to those symbols. And then when Jesus came in the meridian of time, they would recognize him. And of course, many
Yeah.
did and converted to Christianity or what became Christianity. And of course, many did not also.
Yeah.
Um,
I imagine when Christ comes again, it'll be a lot like Joseph and his brothers, where they're being tested, and then at some point he will reveal who he is and how he's been preserving them. And I think it will be a very similar experience.
Yeah, and in reality, we know he's not coming just one big time, but there will be several appearances
Several.
before he appears to the whole world.
And he
I
will come to
cannot
his
wait.
temple.
What's that?
President Nelson often said he will come to his temple.
Yeah,
And it's
which
something that's
one?
funny that I had found. Um, eh, President Nelson really urged the temple worship, and and that got me focused on that a lot. One of the things I had found is I had gained an interest in the Ojibwe language, and I looked up a phonetic translation for Adam-on-Diam, and I've looked it up in every language, can't find anything. Looked it up in Ojibwe, and I found that it meant a purchased path for a particular reason to a particular place. So I'm like, okay, obviously there's some nuance here. I need to talk to someone, a native person, to understand how does this work? Because to me, it sounds like you're a purchase path. The fall is necessitates a redeemer to
Right,
return into the presence of God.
right.
So to me, that made sense. And I thought that's kind of funny that it's very coincidental, but Elder Betnar also said there's no coincidences. So I'm gonna just put this on
Ah,
my shelf and go, this means a lot to me. Um,
100%. Yeah.
so
Well,
it's got me thinking of covenant path constantly. And it's weird how we see this Via Dolorosa, where Christ is literally walking a path to fulfill all righteousness for our covenant path. And it's just remarkable that I don't know. I keep thinking that it he did this in a period of hours, and it was exhausting. It was painful. It hurt,
it's unimaginable how brutal it was.
and but the whole time he's already gone through Gethsemane. He's thinking of us. He's there.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it, what is it? Not my will, but thine be done. That has to be some of the hardest words ever uttered and heard. And
Yeah, and I love the part in the Garden of Gethsemane where, you know, his disciples are falling asleep and it was a long day and they just had a Passover meal and they were tired and sleepy,
sorry.
you know, and three times he begged him, "Can you please stay up with me?" And they couldn't, and an angel came to comfort him. And there are lots of theories of who that angel was, but I believe it was Michael who helped Jehovah create the earth. And I'm sure he was saying, remember, this was the plan all along. You can do this. You got this. You
Yeah,
know,
brought about the fall. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
the
That they
chiasmus to
knew,
it.
yeah, they knew that plan from the very beginning. That the atonement, it was never a backup plan. It was always the plan, only because Heavenly Father created us and knew we were going to mess up.
Hmm.
because we were going to be mortal and that human nature was going to cause us to sin, and no unclean thing can enter God's presence. So we needed an I'll teach you a Hebrew word. After I wrote the Via Dolorosa, I was just having so much fun with Judaism, and I'd been studying Judaism for years. So I wrote this book called The Language of Heaven,
Yeah.
and each chapter is a different Hebrew word that really opens up your understanding, helps you do a deep dive, specifically in the Old Testament, because
Yeah.
predominantly the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. So the Hebrew word I was just thinking of that I was going to say was that we were.
Kafar?
What's that?
Is it kafar?
No,
Oh, okay, okay.
there are men. No, that's a good one though. There are a lot of Hebrew words that mean or relate to covenant. The
Hmm.
subtitle of my book is super long. It's Hebrew words every Latter-day Saint should know to better understand the Bible, covenants, and God. And so, anyway, that one's a good one. But no, the word that I was thinking of is Gaal, G-A apostrophe A-L, which means a kinsman redeemer. So
Huh.
you've heard of many stories in the Old Testament and the New Testament where somebody in the family gets in trouble. They owe somebody money and they can't
Yeah.
pay it off. And so a family member steps in to restore them so they don't get thrown in jail or prison. And they pay that price. And we see that in a lot of examples, oftentimes with money, right?
Yeah.
In the scriptures. But Jesus Christ is the ultimate kinsman redeemer. He wasn't just some guy that, okay, I'll pay the price. He's our family. He's the family member stepping in to pay that price so that we aren't sent to prison, meaning, eternal prison. That is so touching to me. I mean, just the Redeemer idea is great, but when you know it's a kinsman Redeemer and you
Yeah.
remember he's our brother, that it's not just a duty, but he does it out of love because we're family. That is so touching to me.
It, yeah, it again reminds me of Joseph and his brothers.
Yeah,
That it's literally his brothers, you know, let's be done with them. Let's get our money's worth. And let's be, in a sense, they're offering a sacrifice. They're killing a lamb and putting
right.
it on that garment. And it's so weird.
There's so
It
many
wasn't till last year that
similarities
yeah, it
between
wasn't.
Joseph and Jesus. Yes, so many.
Oh my gosh. Joseph has always been my favorite subject since I was a little kid. And it's probably because that Ben Kingsley movie. They did such a great
Oh,
job with it.
did you ever see the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat
I think we had the VHS or the video of it
with Donny
of the
Osmond?
stage play with Donny Osmond. Donny
Yeah.
Osmond, by the way, Donny and Marie are the reason why my family are Latter-day Saints. My
Oh,
parents, with their parents, had written the Osmonds, and the Osmonds had sent a family, um, a pamphlet on the family from the church,
wow.
and that is what ushered us into that.
That's
I
amazing.
benefited by being born into the covenant from that. So I
Oh,
have them to thank for everything.
that is so sweet. And I'm sure that would just make their day to hear that story. That is so sweet. What great missionaries they have been.
Oh yeah,
I watched actually just a video the other day of him talking about being in the show because as the
yeah,
members of the
yeah.
church, we've been studying Joseph, right? And so some people interviewed him and he was sharing his experiences of performing 2,000 times that story. And so he said he spent a lot of time really thinking about Joseph. And when I hear the song towards the end, where Joseph reveals himself to his brothers and forgives them, it just brings me to tears, like ugly crying every
Yeah.
time. Yeah, that story just gets me. But even last month or February, when we were studying Abraham and Isaac, so many similarities between Isaac and Jesus Christ. Again,
Mhm.
he's all over the Old Testament. And I always get a little frustrated when members of the church are like, oh, I like studying the New Testament or the Book of Mormon. That Old Testament is full of weird stories. And they do seem weird if you don't understand that they're all pointing to Jesus Christ. We're told
Yeah.
everything is a type of Christ. And we have to just look for those. And when you start looking, they're everywhere. It's just amazing. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Since you like languages like I do, before Hebrew became a language, they used kind of like pictograms. And
Mhm.
so, let's see, not to put you on the spot here, but do you remember what the very first sentence of the Old Testament is? In the
And it says
beginning.
in the beginning, but
Yeah. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, right? And then it goes into the creation story.
yeah.
The word God that's used is actually Elohim in
Hmm.
Hebrew, which is plural. And some people have said, oh, well, maybe that means Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. But more, I think the more common belief among scripture scholars is that it is the council of the gods. And if you've
Yeah.
been to the temple, then that should absolutely ring true to you. But then so before Hebrew, there were two images used to describe that whole sentence. So the first one is a picture of like ram's horns. And even in sign language, ram's horns means power and authority, right?
Hmm.
And then the second symbol is a cross, and the cross represents covenant. And so it was understood at the time, just using those two. Well, and even the ram's horn had something that the Hebrew words had to do with Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
So it was understood just with these two symbols that in the beginning, the plan was organized from the powerful ones that there would be a cross and a covenant to save mankind.
Yeah.
Like
What's
that's
funny?
Jesus Christ. The first sentence of the Old Testament is all about Jesus Christ. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I see. I love looking at ancient languages and the imagery. Like you have
Yeah,
to see the imagery,
yeah,
even though if you don't know what it means, or if you can't read ancient languages, there's still, it's almost like rhyming in images. Kind of weird. But like you even look at ancient Chinese and their symbol for the garden, with a
yeah.
box with a cross in the middle.
Right.
They have a garden story themselves. And even these early rulers coming out of Mesopotamia, all of them depicted with horns.
Yep.
Yeah, Anu, the god
Yep.
of heaven, depicted with horns.
Have you ever heard of the podcast called The Ancient Tradition?
Yes, yes. And
It's
when I
amazing.
listened to it, I'm like, hey, I had that idea for, like, no, I thought of that. And so I kind of got upset with myself because I'm like, I feel like I've gone through all this study and prayer and research just for someone to kind of spill it out. And I'm like, hey, they did it even better.
Well,
Like,
she does such a great job, and I would not be surprised if she were a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There is nothing that she says that does not run parallel with our beliefs.
mhm.
And the point is that these are ancient traditions from the very beginning, and
Yes,
they all point to Jesus Christ and the temple.
yes.
Love that podcast. And by the way, I should say, I love your show. I love what you're doing, that you just start talking and you get people thinking. And clearly, everybody really appreciates that and likes that because you're doing so well. And so maybe I feel like I should teach something else to your audience. So, do you want to learn some more
Do it.
Hebrew words?
Yes,
Or
yes.
actually,
Give us that.
I mean, we could do that too. I don't know how long we've been talking, but I wanted to also have you share, since this is supposed to be an Easter episode, maybe we'll skip that or unless we have time. But I wanted to hear or have you share with your audience the things that you shared with me
Yes.
about the cool things you're doing for Easter, the
Yeah.
meaningful traditions that you've started.
Yeah, so my wife actually had this wonderful presentation that she had done and she's very into sensory things. She's has all of her education in education, and there's many different ways to communicate something. So she uses tells the Easter story using senses. So you close your eyes and maybe you get a heavy nail, or feel lightly the thorns, or you smell incense, and, and goes through all of the story. And then, since we can't always give a presentation and do that for people all the time, um, one thing we've started doing is putting it in little Easter eggs and just shrinking it down with little messages. and then you read it in order. The outside of the egg has numbers on it, and it ends with an empty egg, empty tomb. And so we've done that to kind of for our kids to help illustrate that. And it's got to the point where we have a 9-year old, a 7-year old, a 5-year old, and a 3-year old. And the middle kids are remembering. Well, the oldest kid remembers too, but they're remembering the stories every year. And so we're like, okay, like this is perfect. And then we'll go out and do it with like somebody in the neighborhood or someone in the ward and just leave that for them with instructions and
Oh, you
not tell
give
them
them
it's
the
us.
eggs with the
So
stuff inside.
yeah, so hopefully they don't watch this and it's still a
And they're like,
surprise.
oh, it was them. I love that idea. And I did something similar when my kids were little too, where we'd open up a numbered egg one at a time
Mm,
with stuff inside. But I love that it's sensory because what Jesus did was very
yeah.
physical. And I've often thought maybe that's why members of the church don't love Easter so much because it's all brutal stuff. There's blood and guts and scourging, and it's not fun like Christmas. It's a new baby, yay.
Hmm.
And yet, again, Christmas would mean nothing without Easter. And so it's
Yeah.
a little tricky to talk, especially with little ones, to talk about crucifixion and stuff that is crazy, and the Roman Empire and that their influence obviously on the crucifixion and what went down, and how brutal they were. All of that, it's hard to talk about. And so back to my book, that's why I tried to soften it a little bit in the suggested activities. And again, it depends on the
Mm.
ages. For example, I even have suggested Easter movies to watch with your family based on the ages of your kids,
Oh yeah, that's
ranging
helpful.
from cartoon, cute, to The Passion of the Christ, which is rated R, but probably really accurate.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
imagine lots of our scriptures would be rated R. I heard one
yeah.
comedian saying, I was sent as a sister missionary to El Salvador. I'd never watched a rated R movie. And then the church is like, now you're going to be in one. And
Yeah, same thing with the Book of Mormon, there's a lot
oh
of
my gosh.
gory stuff going on there for sure.
Yeah. You
Anyway,
know what's really unique is a lot of these Christmas songs are actually Easter songs
that's
too. They,
true.
they talk
That's a
about
great
the
point.
coming of Christ
Yeah.
and even the second coming of Christ, which is inevitable, and we're looking forward to that. We're obviously being prepared for it. The
Yeah.
world is being prepared for it. With every temple that is constructed, what do they shout when they construct and set apart a temple? What is it that they shout?
The Hosanna shout.
And my linguist here, what does the Hosanna shout mean?
Save us, help us.
And they shouted this just as Christ on Palm Sunday uh, came into Jerusalem. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in a
And
sense, we are ushering in the second. I guess that is true because the prophet did say that.
yeah. And there is so much symbolism at that triumphal entry, they call it.
Hmm.
For example, Jesus was on a donkey, and people say, well, why didn't he just ride a horse? But a horse was an animal of war. So if he had come in on a horse, he would be very aggressively uh, approaching Roman leaders, the Jewish leaders, and that was obviously not Jesus's intent
Yeah.
or his style, but
And the
a
Jews have a
donkey.
thing about that, right? Where they identify, well, we have a savior that comes in this way, or he'll come in this way.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so if he comes on a donkey and then but not Jesus, he doesn't count for some reason.
right, right. And the donkey actually was also what King Solomon rode in on into
Hmm.
Jerusalem. It was sort of a common royal animal that was used. And those who were familiar with that symbol recognized what he was saying by simply riding in on a donkey.
So
And then I
did
love,
high priests also ride in on a donkey with a lamb? I think
you mean when they
I'm not sure.
were bringing in a lamb to sacrifice it at the temple?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So I had heard that, but I hadn't verified it. That high priests, on the when they go to sacrifice, they would bring in the chosen lamb. And what was coincidental is that Christ came in as both the high priest and the lamb.
right. through that exact same gate.
Mm,
It was called the Lambing Field outside of that gate. The gate has many names. One is the Lambing Gate, another is the Golden Gate,
mm.
and it has even more names than that. But that's also the same gate that Jesus is going to enter during his second coming, which is awesome. And this just amazes me. I've been watching reports on the news on YouTube showing that that gate, which has been sealed
Yeah.
since Suleiman 500 AD, something like that. He was a Muslim leader. He knew about the Jewish prophecy that the Messiah would come through that gate. Some believe that's why he sealed it. Others believe he just sealed it just to keep the city safe. And other gates are still open today. Some have been sealed, now they're open. This one is still sealed, but it's cracking open,
Ooh.
which is
Well,
interesting. Another super interesting thing is on the wall. I've seen videos of this. When I was there last time, I didn't see it on the wall, but I also wasn't looking. But they're finding there are some Hebrew letters
oh
appearing
yeah.
on the wall. Have you heard about that? And
Yeah.
you know
Well,
what it
Jared
spells?
with Christian Homestead does a very good job
It
covering things
does.
in Israel,
Yeah, yeah,
and I've seen him. So I follow a few rabbis myself, so I'll see them talk about it, and then I'll see Jared talk about it, and so it's unique to get the full spectrum of it
yeah.
coming in.
And I've seen pictures of it, and it's spelled. Do you know what it spells? Do you remember what?
Yeshua or
Yeah, yeah, or Jehovah,
Jehovah.
but yeah, in Hebrew. Like that gives me goosebumps. That's so
Yehovah.
exciting.
Oh man, it and there's many Jews that were expecting that this last Thursday
Yeah.
uh, would have been the time of the Messiah. But then there's a Jewish belief that every generation has a possible Messiah that can come, and they just have to be righteous enough to bring him in. And
Well, I was
the,
pretty sure ours wasn't going to come yesterday on
the
Thursday. I heard that and I was like, I don't think, I mean, you never know, but I was thinking, uh, but he's coming soon. I'm confident that it's going to be
yeah,
really soon and sooner than I think a lot of people realize. It's so
I've
exciting.
I've always imagined since I was a child. Oh, I'm totally gonna witness that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But not everybody thinks that. But I think our generation, I'm older than you, I'm sure, by quite a bit. I have always felt that. And I think a lot of people my age felt that.
Hmm.
And then we're so lucky that we have patriarchal blessings that can let us know also if we are going to be part of that. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're so lucky. We have so many additional blessings offered to us, those that are members of our church and following that covenant path. I mean, and not to say that there aren't other people around the world of other faiths who aren't getting information, because we know in the end, in the last days, there will be visions and dreams. And those are not just for members of our church, they're from
Yeah.
people from all faiths. There's a really neat expression that's become popular called holy envy. Do you know what that is? Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's an expression that's actually tied to our faith. It came from a Swedish priest. So what happened is the church had announced that they were going to build a temple in Stockholm, Sweden.
Hmm.
And I've been to that temple. It's just lovely. But they had just announced they were going to build it. And what happens often when the church announces that there's some resistance from the local community, that kind of thing. And I just moved from Las Vegas, out of Las Vegas, and a couple years ago they announced that they were going to build a second temple in Las Vegas, which I was super excited because it was going to be on my side of town, like 10 minutes from my house would have been so great.
Hmm.
Um, and I was shocked because we have a large LDS community in Vegas, but the community around the neighborhood where this temple was going to be built was petitioning and protesting and complaining. And I'm like, what? Why? And it made me just laugh because you know what their biggest complaint was?
Is it too bright?
Yes, that's exactly what they said. I'm like, are you kidding me? We live in Las
Yeah.
Vegas.
In
We
more
have
ways
the
than one,
most
it's too
light
bright.
pollution of any place probably on earth, but also the spiritual light that would come. And
Yes.
so my ward and my stake were very, very active in attending all of these community meetings and sharing information. Anyway, that was kind of a little tangent. So, same thing happened in Sweden. And finally, this Swedish priest stood up and he said, hold on, you must not know who the Mormons are. They are a wonderful people. They are family oriented and worship faithfully and help in the community and do countless hours of service and on the things that we are known for. And he said, do you really not realize that they will bring great blessings into our community? And then he coined this term of holy envy. He said, I have holy envy for
Mm.
members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because they are so faithful and such a covenant striving people to do good in this world and on and on. And then he said, and I have holy envy for the Jews for their obedience. They try so hard to study the Torah and follow every single commandment. And then he said, I have holy envy for even the Muslims. They're so faithful for their prayer 5 times a day, wherever they are. And I've seen that. I've been in stores and like in a restroom in a store, and a Muslim woman will come in to do her washing and her prayers in the bathroom, and that always impressed me. I stayed with a Muslim family and they were incredible. I'll tell you about that maybe another day. But anyway, he went on and on and on. And I think because that term was associated with the church, all of a sudden people in the church started talking about that. And I absolutely agree 100% that
Mm.
I have holy envy for all of these other religions, and that
Yeah.
we're all trying to find God and grow closer to God. And there's a really cool word in Hebrew for sacrifice. And what it really means in Hebrew is trying to get a relationship with God. Like if you obey a commandment and you feel like you're sacrificing so much, to keep this commandment, if you turn that word into Hebrew, you are showing that you want a closer relationship with God. And that totally transforms your
Yeah.
understanding of keeping the commandments, right?
It's literally let thy will be done.
Yeah,
I want to spend more time with dad. This is what I'm going to do to sacrifice my will and my other stuff because my greater will is to be with dad.
yeah. And to have that relationship and have that understanding of who he is and how do I fit into his whole plan. Yeah. And that takes humility. Anyway, that's, I just think Jude Hebrew is so rich
Mm.
in so many ways. Let's see, how long have we been talking? Should I teach you a couple more Hebrew words? Do we have time? Or you think your
Yeah.
audience is going to get tired?
Well, we could always break it up. And I don't know anybody that watches the videos the whole way. Uh,
Oh,
I do have holy envy for the art Amish community here in town. I've
yes.
I've seen their stagecoaches all lined up, or we're on a long stretch of road. I was coming back from um, Big Big Springs, Missouri, which is one of the locations identified as possible um, waters of Mormon. And so I took my children there, and I was
Oh,
coming back long day, and then stuck behind these carriages, and I was not even upset. I was just like, gosh, man, I want to be friends with those guys. I
right.
see them at the store every time I go into the store, and they're so kind, so nice.
Oh, and just the community that they've built,
Mm.
one barn burns down and they all go in and help them build a new, like without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's a
That's Zion.
giant community, isn't
Yeah,
it?
we have a
Yeah,
lot to learn as a people, and I think when the millennium happens, there's going to be a lot of us learning from other groups as well.
I agree. I imagine that when Christ comes and it's obvious that he is the Messiah, everybody's going to want to know, how do I join your church? Where do I get baptized? Tell me about temples. How do I do that? Right? We're going to have a lot of missionary work. And then I don't, this is my personal belief, it's not doctrine at all, but I imagine that all these beautiful cathedrals and mosques and synagogues and, all
It'll
of
be
these.
retrofitted.
Yes. And can you
Yeah.
imagine, like I think of these beautiful, we do have a temple in Spain where I serve my mission now, but there were so many beautiful
Hmm.
cathedrals. And if everybody wants to join the church, and not everybody will, but those who do, they're not going to be able to fit in the Madrid temple. They're going to need one up down in Barcelona, or, and that the cathedral, the Sagrada Familia, the famous cathedral in
Hmm.
Barcelona, that I was just there last spring. That will make such a beautiful temple.
Well, I actually have an opinion on that, where that it may actually be doctrine. But this is just a thought. It's this is the way I've always read it in Isaiah when he talks about um, in the millennium and the daughters of Zion being redeemed, and seven women will hold to one man. Um, my mind never went to polygamy on that. My mind always went to like the churches because it's talking about the millennium and being redeemed. So it made me think of the other churches around the world now recognizing Christ and wanting a name, wanting to be part of that covenant and being adopted and brought in and saying, "Hey, we'll provide for ourselves." This is like them bringing their own buildings and churches. That's the way it's always occurred to me. But
I love that interpretation.
yeah,
That I really like that because the bride is the church.
yeah,
So
exactly.
thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. It's such a great point.
I'm not going to say I'm right, but I am always right.
I believe it. I believe it. That's really cool.
Well, we should actually do a series of just us talking more and going over some of the more of your books, especially this Hebrew language book. That is a book I
There's well, the way I wrote that book is for the entire year of Old Testament study through the Come Follow Me program.
okay.
So you literally could learn a new Hebrew word every week during the year. I mean, you don't have to just learn it during the Old Testament year, but it sure helps with the Old Testament study. Um, yeah. And then I imagined, and I even said in the book, if you do this with your family, focus on one word, and then during the week, challenge each other to use that word in a sentence, like
Yeah.
just in random conversation, use this word, so that you really hear it and use it every day during those 7 days.
My family actually we started studying uh Hebrew,
Oh, you
but
did?
it's not biblical Hebrew, it's everyday Hebrew. And
Yeah.
so it gives you like the masculine, feminine and word for the door. And we used to at our old house we had all
Oh,
the tacked up all the things there, and
wow.
we say, "Let's get into the car." The kids picked it up very quickly, um, so they still say, "Oh man, I can never remember what the masculine version of it is." Um, but it ends with Bevakasha,
Oh,
and
just
it's
saying, let's get
basically
in the car.
let's get into the car. And so my daughter will yell that really loud, and she has a little lisp, so it's so I never hear it correctly anyways.
Oh,
But it's something we have not got that stuff back out yet, and it's something that we're really wanting to get back and studying Hebrew because I feel like I want to preserve languages, and that's probably one of the hardest
yeah.
ones. So let's start it young with the kids because it'll
Yeah.
probably be easier for them
Yeah, for
now
sure.
than later. And
What was
it's a
what?
valuable language.
Well, you're such an impressive dad. I know you guys homeschool your
Oh, it
kids.
sounds good. It sounds good.
It does. It
I'm
sounds
really
very
lazy
good.
though.
No, that's hard work. So what was out of all of the Hebrew words that you learned? What do you remember? What was your favorite and why?
Oh my gosh. I don't recall much myself. In the moment, I was learning. I was like, "Oh yeah," like I remember implementing it into some of my language, but that was like a year and a half ago, and now I'm drawing blanks.
Yeah, you have to practice it for sure.
And since we moved, I just have not looked at it because we haven't put the tags back up on anything. And we used to, uh, I think even popsicle, I think they call it Arctic, which I think is a later Hebrew attribution or
Oh, and I think
attributed.
it's
But
also a brand name for an ice cream, Arctic.
yeah, but we haven't got those cards back out of storage since we've moved, so I'm way out of touch.
Yeah,
So
it takes a long time to unpack everything because we just moved too.
yeah,
And
it's like
yeah,
I feel like I tossed out all that knowledge and I have to get it back. And same thing with a lot of these video topics is I'll have something on my mind and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about this. But then when I finally have time and I'm burnt out, I'm like, what was it again? But I had rehearsed it over and over again. It's pacing back and forth, but then I get in front of a camera and I'm like, I'm too tired.
For sure. Yeah. I was telling you, I have a movie review mom YouTube channel. Subscribe. And I was posting every single day for years. And then during this move, and then I've been busy writing a bunch of books, I haven't posted hardly, I don't know, once every 2 or 3 weeks. Uh,
That's better than me.
well, I mean, but I also had a really great virtual assistant in the Philippines who was editing and helping me,
Mm.
do a bunch of stuff. And so she got married and moved and to America even. Anyway. So I don't have her anymore, and I don't have time to do all the editing. And so I've just been doing a bunch of lives. But anyway, different tangent. You want me to share some of my favorite Hebrew words?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. And this is sort of related to the Via Dolorosa. We want to still get back on the Easter idea. So the first word is Hagah, Hagah, and it means um, to study, to read, to learn, in relation to scriptures, which is great. It's not just reading it, but really consuming it and then having it manifest in actions. Sometimes we are like, yeah, I put in my 5 minutes reading the scriptures, but if
But
you didn't,
faith, acting on it.
yeah, it's an action. These are action verbs. But there's a fun connotation to this word Hagah, and that is tasting the scriptures. So have
Ooh,
you ever seen at the Western, you know what the Western Wall is in
yes.
Jerusalem? Yeah, so it's what Jews believe is the last remaining wall of
Mhm.
the last temple. It is their most holy site in all of the world. And so it is an honor and a privilege to go to the Western Wall and to study the scriptures. And you'll see them, their body. Have you seen this like in videos and
Yeah,
stuff where they're rocking? So it's not just, well, it reminds me of being at the veil in the temple, honestly, where there is some movement going on, but um, their body is so immersed in it. And part of Haggah isn't just reading it in your mind, but speaking the words
yeah.
too. Your whole body is
The
engaged.
rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And as members of the church, we have a verse in the Book of Mormon that challenges us to feast upon the scriptures, right? So that concept isn't foreign to us to just really consume them, taste them, have them, be part of your physical experience while you're reading the scriptures, which why is one reason why taking notes in your scriptures is so effective. I have the big giant scriptures because I use
Hmm.
them like a workbook and I'm taking notes in the margins and it's a very active thing. I love that. Um, anyway, and the Jews do it so, so well. And then, so I love that word because everything in Judaism is about listening or hearing and then taking action. For example, in their Shabbat, where they have this, and this is so symbolic of Jesus Christ, there are two candles. They have the board, they have their challah bread on the board, and they have a little linen over the bread. Does that remind you of anything?
Oh, yeah. The burial shroud over the body of the Savior,
Yeah, so we've got that
who's the
board
bread of life.
representing the wood cross, the bread, which Jesus told us himself, he is the bread of life.
Hmm.
He's on that cross, and he was born in Bethlehem, which means
House
house
of bread.
of bread. Yeah, which is so cool. And then that linen is that shroud that he would have been buried in. So that's kind of the big part of the Shabbat, their Sabbath. And then they have two candlesticks. And uh, for years, I asked different Christian scholars, what's the deal with the Jewish with the two candles? And they were like, I don't know, light,
The two
and I'm like,
witnesses.
yeah, right, right. The law of two witnesses is absolutely one of them. Finally, I had been studying with a rabbi and I was like, by the way, why the two candles? And without even hesitating, he's like, oh, you learn it, you do it.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that makes so much sense. Anyway, and so this next word is one of my all-time favorites, and it's a perfect example of learning something, knowing something, and doing it. So the word is Shema. Did you ever learn that word? It's spelled Shema, Shema.
No.
No,
Most of
but
the
it's a
things I
super
learned is
Jewish.
like door and
Yeah, yeah.
God.
So Shema. is it means hear, like Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, or hearken, O Israel, right? Listen, hear me. And it comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And so the Shema Israel prayer that every Jewish child learns as soon as they can speak is what every Jew says the first thing when they wake up in the morning. And it's that Shema prayer, those verses, the last thing they say before they go to bed. And when possible, it should be the last thing they say before they die, which isn't always possible. But anyway, I think that that's really sweet that they try, to be sure we say this before we die. But anyway, it's also what's written in the phylactery, the little black box
Yeah.
that you've probably seen pictures of. Inside that box is the Shema Israel prayer. And you've seen a mezuzah. You know what a mezuzah is?
No.
I have
It,
one in my drawer behind me. You've probably seen it. It's a little rectangular box, and you see them on Jewish homes on
oh, yes,
their front
yes. Yeah.
door. And inside is also another little scroll with the Shema prayer, the Shema Israel
Yeah.
prayer. And yeah, and as whenever they walk past it, they touch it and then put it to their lips like they're kissing. And I love that they are constantly aware of that. And what makes it even more profound is it's in that prayer. If you read Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9, it starts off, Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God. And then it talks about, it goes on and on, but it talks about love God with all of your heart, your soul, and your might. You know that scripture, right?
Mhm.
And so, because they're doing these things, they're verbally saying these prayers morning, nighttime, when they touch the mezuzah, so many occasions in a single day is so sweet that they're so mindful of that. And then you get to the Western Wall and it just takes it to another level. So I'm going to share, is it all right if I share an experience that I had there at the Western Wall?
Yeah, yeah. I just don't want to neglect that we do have some faithful Latter-day Saints that are treat BYU like that.
What?
Where they put their hand on the Y, like I I could care less about that stuff, but I
Have you
do
seen people
love
do that?
well like sports stars.
That's so funny. That's really funny. I didn't even know that. And I graduated from BYU. We didn't do that back then. That's
Uh,
funny.
yeah, just a joke.
Well, anyway, okay, so this whole Shema Israel prayer and scriptures I saw come to life at the Western Wall. So, for your viewers who might not have been there or don't know what it is, definitely look up videos and pictures because it's amazing. But picture like this massive stone wall,
Mhm.
just massive. The stones themselves are massive, but then it's also, really wide and really tall. And then a big concrete pad beyond that, and then another big football field length concrete pad kind of out beyond that. So, of course, the goal is to get next to the wall. And so there's a curtain divider between the men's side and the women's side. Um, I think mostly for respect and privacy. But again, if you've been to the temple, that probably doesn't surprise you. And so when we got there, and this was just like a dream come true, the first time I ever saw it was in some video when I was a little girl. And I'm like, oh, what is that? I want to go there. I want to do that. And so before they approach the wall, the men particularly, they're dressed in all kinds of really cool outfits, I call them, but their vestments, or, well, that kind of sounds Catholic, but the special clothing, the prayer
Mhm.
rolls, robes, it depends on which sect of Judaism they belong to. And you see all kinds of outfits, depending on their sect, and they're all really cool. But before they approach the wall, there's a special little area with faucets, and they put water in faucet, and they wash their hands, which again, if you've been to the temple, should absolutely ring true to
Yeah.
you as they're preparing to approach the wall or that temple veil. And so when I couldn't go on the men's side, but there was just a little divider, and so I could stand there and watch them. And they had tables set out where you could get a copy of the Torah if you didn't bring yours for whatever reason. And then on the men's side, they even have another little room inside another wall building where they could go in and study and read and whatnot. And then you see some men wearing these really cool, tall, fur hats, and then some people are just wearing the little yarmulke, and some
Hmm.
are wearing a black hat, depending on their community. And then they would go to the wall. Now, some of the men are right up against the wall, and that's where you see them rocking. They're holding the Torah, which, by the way, is the first 5 books in the Old
Hmm.
Testament. We call it the Pentateuch. And they do read the rest of the Old Testament, but they really love the Torah, and that's their commandment to really study, and they love to debate it. But anyway, um, so it was very sweet to see them just at the wall, being obedient. And to me, that was showing God that they love God with all their heart. They were there to be obedient and to, have that relationship with God. And so, I'm taking pictures from beyond the barrier, and I just thought it was so sweet. And then, I finished that and I thought, well, let's go hang out with the girls and see what they're doing on the women's side. And the women don't have a specific outfit. Many of them are wearing dresses. Some were wearing pants. Some were wearing scarves. And I brought a scarf. I went with my twin sister. And so we both put our scarves on so we could show respect. But not all of the women had them. And by the way, one of the things that happens at the wall, in addition to praying and reading scriptures, is writing a
Yeah.
letter
Sticking
or
it in the
prayer.
wall.
Yeah. And you stick it in the cracks of these stones. And so again, when I was a little girl and I saw that, I'm like, I want to do that. And so my twin sister and I wrote our little letters, read them to each other, cried, and then we, went to the wall to see if we could find a place to put our little letter. And we crumpled it up and shoved it in between some stones. And later I found out that there's a group of rabbis that go to the wall every 6 months, and they take out all of the papers to make room for the next people, because
Hmm.
this has been going on for centuries and centuries. And I found that they take the ones that they remove and they bury them on the Mount of Olives. So my letter
Oh,
is
wow.
now on the Mount of Olives. Isn't that cool? So anyway, so we did that. We're crying and having our moment. And then they had chairs. And so we kind of sat down just so we could observe what all of the women were doing. And pretty soon, this young girl who looked to be maybe 12, 13 years old came up to the wall. She wasn't right up to the wall. She just entered the women's area. And I called her a beehive because she looked like a 12-year-old,
Mm.
Latter-day Saint. Really, she was wearing a dress. And you could tell it must have been her first time because she came with her scriptures and she just kept looking around. And you could tell she was trying to find out if that she was doing it the right way. She just seemed very unsure of herself. And so then we'd kind of look at some of the other women, and then we'd glance back to see how she was doing. And pretty soon she started kind of rocking as she was reading the scriptures. And then we'd glance and look around at some of the other women and check back and see how she was doing again. And pretty soon she was getting into it. She was haga with the scripture. She was tasting it and feeling it. And you could tell the world just disappeared. It was her and God as she was studying and learning and soaking it all in. And I was so tickled for her. And then we saw another teenage girl, and I called her a Laurel because she looked like she was maybe 17 or 18. And she was wearing
Hmm.
a white dress, which again, to me, I felt like I was in the temple with my sisters at the veil. It was such a tender moment. And this teenage girl just made a beeline to the wall, and she put everything on the wall. Her head, her face, her hands, her legs, her whole body was right up against the wall. She didn't have scripture. She wasn't rocking. She was communing with God. She was praying with all her soul. And, members of our church, we believe that the soul is the spirit and the body
Yeah.
combined. So she was doing that Shema prayer, loving God with all her soul. And it was such a profound moment for me, and a moment where I just was ashamed that I don't do that more often. Oftentimes I just fall asleep after a minute, and I'm not fully engaged like that. And it taught me such a valuable lesson. I need to level up. I wholly envy for the way that girl showed me how to pray. I thought that was just so beautiful. So, of course, we're crying again. And finally, we decided the story's going on too long. I'm almost done. So the men showed me loving God with your heart. The girls showed me loving God with your soul. And then pretty soon we heard this big commotion kind of going out behind us on that big football field length concrete pad area where people gather and mill around and stuff. And so we're like, what's going on? So we went over there, we left the wall and then we went out to see what was going on. And this massive group of teenage boys had showed up and they're hoopering and hollering. That makes me sound like I'm 100 years old to say that. Those hoopering and hollering. Anyway, they were making all this noise and they were putting their arms around each other and they were singing in Hebrew songs. And then pretty soon they started putting each other up on their shoulders and, marching around. And they were just so on fire for the Sabbath. Remember, I was there on the Sabbath and I'm like, wow, our Latter-day Saint boys don't act like that on the Sabbath day. It was invigorating. And pretty soon they let us join in their circle, like a kumbaya moment. It was so amazing. I was so energized for the Sabbath day, just like it was so awesome. And so we had fun playing with them. And then a group of teenage girls showed up and they didn't have nearly the energy that these teenage boys did. And those boys showed me how to love God with all your might. Back to that
Mm.
word Shema, the heart, soul, and might, just opened up and was perfectly illustrated in these Jewish groups and these people. Eventually, they quieted down and became reverent, and then they approached the wall where they were worshiping. But before that, they were celebrating God and celebrating the Sabbath. And I just thought that was so amazing. So those are two of my favorite words, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
those
so
are
many others,
great words to have.
aren't they? Yeah, yeah,
I like how it's so encompassing of so much that there's so much more to one word, and it's the power that is in a single word.
yeah.
I
Layers. I
love that.
love layers and learning all of those. And to bring it back to Easter, um, we were there right after Easter, and so there were still palms hanging down from a lot of the buildings in the old city of Jerusalem. And you were talking about when Jesus went through that triumphal
Hmm.
entry. That was the last week of his life, the last days of his life. And in addition to shouting Hosanna, the people there had the palms, right? And the palm is an ancient symbol that represents layers of things. Do you know what those are? Did you study those with your kids?
Well, I know one is the ushering in, but then I also know that in medieval times, people would take a palm home to symbolize that they have done their voyage to Jerusalem, their pilgrimage. But uh, I thought it was a royal ushering, a royal.
Yeah, that's one layer of that word. It also symbolically has represented people. If you look at a palm, it actually represents, well, the whole palm or the palm tree looks like a person, kind of, the
Hmm,
hair at the top. And then the palm leaf itself looks like a hand. They were raising the palm, raising their hand to affirm,
yeah.
you know, and if you've been to the temple again, that should kind of pique your curiosity or confirm what we do with hands. Anyway, um, as just another layer. So, didn't you tell me, did you participate in a Palm parade on Palm Sunday once?
No, must have not been me, but I do have something to share about that.
Please.
Have you seen in like uh, ancient Akkadian and Sumerian etchings and engravings, you always see the somewhat garden scene, but you see a king or a god holding a pine cone
Yeah.
and a handbag. Well, it turns out that the handbag is actually a bucket and it's filled with pollen, and the pine cone itself is an applicator for
Pollen,
that.
like bee pollen?
Like yeah, like pollen to pollinate a garden,
Oh,
but like what bees would do.
oh, I didn't know
So
that.
instead of bees pollinating, it's showing the god or the king acting as the nurturer of the garden, who is applicating the garden, pollinating it as if it's as if he's Adam taking care of the garden. That's what it looks like to me. But the way I think it was used, the way that we see it, is probably a breakdown of an earlier tradition. Because what it looks like, how it was actually used, was rulers used that to say, you depend on me. I depend on me as your ruler. depend on the state. I'll take care of you. And
Interesting.
it was a way to centralize power and make a name for yourself. That's my uh, opinion based on the evidence and the writings.
That's really cool. I think I told you, you and I talked last night, that I'm going to Egypt this May. Fingers crossed that things kind of calm down over there in the Middle East, because that's been a lifetime bucket list I've had on my
Mhm.
list forever. Um, and so right now I'm so entrenched in this Rome book that as soon as I finish it, which is going to be next week, I have to give it to my publisher. I'm going to be all in on Egypt, and I'm super excited. I've gone to many classes about Egyptian hieroglyphics and history and culture and all that kind of stuff, but I want to really dive in because to kind of combine the series of Jerusalem and the Via Dolorosa and then this Rome book, I'm going to write one. I've started about Egypt and Christ's, we know he was in Egypt, Christ's
Yeah.
connection to Egypt. And I've already got some tour guides set up to take us through the Coptic church, Christian churches in Cairo, for example. Anyway, I'm so excited.
Yeah. There's
So,
two Jewish settlements that were being used during Christ's birth during that time. He likely would have been on one of those outskirt ones where Goshen or Avaris, where that area was.
yeah,
There is a Jewish settlement out there. I forget what the town is called, but that's one of the places I'd like to visit
yeah.
because
Well,
he would
that's
have
where
grown up,
yeah, I mean, we don't
building.
know, but we do know. I mean, obviously, Egypt and Moses, I mean, Egypt has a lot of symbolism that we can be learning layers of meaning from. And so I'm super excited to dive into all of that and finish or start. Well, I did start, but continue writing that book. And honestly, people ask me all the time, why did you write this book? Because I love learning. And when I write these books, I am spending months and months researching, or years in some cases,
Mhm.
researching a specific topic and then really diving deep. And it's so fun. I just love that. And
So
you're like that.
you probably be interested in the historical synchronisms and the time of Joseph,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Abraham,
Yeah. I
and
think we're kindred spirits that way, that we love all of that
yeah.
stuff.
There's a video I did recently where I just did a whiteboard and drew out a timeline
Yeah, you
and
told
drew
me
out
about
the connections to Egypt. And I'm like, I don't know how to dress it up and make it fancy that people will pay attention, but here's just the blunt, here it is.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the topic, I'll watch a whiteboard. I haven't seen that video of yours. I've seen a bunch of the other ones, but I'm gonna have to find that one and watch it.
I did stumble over myself talking about the chronology. Um, I had mixed in something that Greg with Quick Media,
Greg
he and I
Nelson.
were messaging each other, and
Oh.
I mixed in. I'm like, wait, is that what he told me, or is that what I told him? And it was in the middle of the video, and I'm like, okay, I messed up there. So
We're so lucky. There are so many great Latter-day Saint podcasters and YouTubers out there sharing amazing stuff. I was interviewed actually in a show last week, and the hostess said afterwards, she said, "How do you know all of this stuff?" And I laughed. I'm like, "Well, I'm old and I've been learning this stuff for decades, but also I want to learn this stuff." And
it's
there's no
interesting.
excuse to not know this stuff anymore because there's so much exposure. There's so much content out there that we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, I want to learn more stuff."
See, it helps me learning the history in the past
Yeah,
helps me today recognize like because a lot of people will just brush things off and to me I look and go like this is God working in our life right now, this is amazing, this is how he's done it in the past, and this is what he's doing right now. And so to me it's invigorating, it's exciting,
same.
but it's hard to communicate that sometimes. So
Well,
that you're like for me, I'm like a kid. I'm like my son who wants to tell me something that's really exciting, but it sounds like a lot of ums and a lot of going around the subject and not quite getting to it. The excitement just spills out.
I know I'm the same way where it's obnoxious. I told you I teach gospel doctrine, and the first time I taught in this new ward, they were all just kind of like, and I was like, okay, I know. I'm a little overly enthusiastic about all of this, and they laughed because it's true.
But we
And
need that.
I know, but I agree 100% with you that the more I learn, the more obvious it is that the church is true. The church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the church of Jesus Christ, and that the plan that Heavenly Father had for all of us is divine, and it is playing out every day in our lives. And if you're just, worried about what's on TV and, the worldly stuff, you're missing all of these things. And if you start connecting the dots, you're just like, it's happening. This is all
Yeah.
unfolding. It's so exciting.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And I want us to continue these conversations. Put it in the comments down below.
Yeah.
What questions do you have for Dr. Trina Boice? And she has YouTube channels. What, YouTube channels?
I
We'll
have three, but
three.
yeah, my movie review mom was the one that was the most active. And I actually started on YouTube years ago before anybody really knew what YouTube
Hmm.
was. I did a thing for Roots TV. It was all about genealogy, and so
Yeah.
they wanted me to vlog before anybody knew what vlogging was. And so I was just putting stuff on my channel, is my name, Trina Boice. So it starts off with a lot of that, and then there's some like random stuff with my kids and family because I didn't know nobody talked about branding back then. And so it's a hodgepodge kind of a mess. And then I have the movie review mom, and then I create a bunch of online courses at lifelonglearningeducation.com. And so I've got some educational videos on there, but I hardly have anything. Oh, actually, I've got a fourth one. I have a travel one, but I haven't put anything on that for years. It's time consuming, and you have to make choices in life. You can't do it all, unfortunately. Well, at least I can't.
Well, we'll put your videos in the description below so people know
Okay.
where to go to subscribe and to hear more from you. And then hopefully we can just keep this a regular visit and go over more of these things because I'm very interested.
I
But
would
I
love
imagine
that.
we have to do these in
I,
uh
they're going to be 7 hour long videos because you and I could talk all day long about all this cool
yeah.
stuff. So we'll have to set a timer and be really disciplined.
Yeah, maybe we should break this, do a release the full one, and then break up that full one into smaller ones for the folks who want the smaller version.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
the very rare moments where we said something brilliant
Yeah.
and skip all the other boring stuff. Well,
Well,
hopefully it wasn't boring. I think it's all cool stuff.
well, I appreciate you reaching out and then getting together and doing this. And I look forward to talking to you more. And everybody, comment, tell us what you love about Dr. Trina Boyce.
Or
and
tell us cool stuff you've learned in your
and
comments.
yeah, tell us what you've learned. And check out our books. We'll talk about them here too.
Awesome.
And like, subscribe, all those things, I guess. All right.
Exactly. Well,
Well, take
thank you for
care.
having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good night.